Hi folks, I'm orta therox, a designer and developer working on the TypeScript team, and in the Apple developer ecosystem there's a term called Sherlocking, and it's used when a platform vendor, like Apple in that case, re-implements an idea that previously was an indie app. And the name comes from a case when Apple took all of the ideas from an indie app by Peril software called Watson into an upgrade of their app, Sherlock. Kind of wild. Apple gave him a design award in 2002 for best innovation, and then in 2003 they literally took the entire user interface and feature set of that indie app and just threw it into their own app. And it's kind of wild because in those situations you actually really don't have much choice in the matter when the platform vendor has decided that the thing that you have is now a feature of their thing. And I've been Sherlocked twice in my open source career by big companies, and these are projects I've devoted years of my time to. And this is the story of the second one, which starts right after the first one. And so this is Rebase on how GitHub Sherlocked Peril. The story starts about 5 years ago. I started wrapping up work on the dependency manager CocoaPods. It's the dependency manager for iOS and Mac projects. Think NPM or pip if you've never used that ecosystem. And I stopped working on CocoaPods actively when Apple announced that Swift Package Manager was going to exist and was going to be a thing. And it was very obvious that it was only a matter of time before Swift Package Manager became the dominant way in which people handled dependencies because Apple controlled the tools. In Apple taking that space, that freed me up to start working on new problems. So I started working on a problem that we'd seen in quite a lot of large open source projects, and we're kind of feeling a bit in our growing dev team at the place I used to work called Artsy. So bear with me, but I generally receive and deal with about 10 to 20 pull requests a day. And that's across many different orgs and many different repos. And if they're a repo that I know well, then I probably already know the culture and, what sort of things need to happen in order to get a pull request merged. For example, do you use a changelog? Is there a specific format for commits? Are labels important in a pull request? Is there README information that needs to be updated when a particular, particular part of the code base is changed? Well, all of those things are sort of cultural rules that, for a drive-by contributor, someone who's just come by to fix a specific problem that they need, well, chances are, unless you have a very long contribution docs and that someone reads it, which is, not always guaranteed, then chances are you're going to have this back and forth on the pull request that that's kind of redundant because you kind of have to do it on a large amount of pull requests. And so I started taking some of the core parts of CocoaPods, like some of the core ideas and some of the core code, and ported it into a new project that is called Danger. And so what Danger does basically is, if you think about how you would be writing unit tests for your code to verify the behavior of your code, Danger gives you unit tests for your pull requests. So you verify the sort of cultural norms that you would expect in a pull request. So, does this PR have a changelog? If this code is changed here, then this code has to change here. People, you might think of it as does my linter pass? But realistically, that's not really the sort of cultural rules because you already kind of have those in CI. It's more a great example was anytime someone edited an analytics file in the Artsy iOS app, then Danger would post a message saying, yeah, you're going to have to update this Google Doc because that's how we communicate with the analytics team. And so being able to sort of connect things that previously weren't connected via a pull request gave a large amount of automation power, and it's useful on projects of almost any size. And so, I spent a year or two working on Danger and got Danger up and running. And me and some of the other, maintainers of the project started thinking, well, okay, so Danger runs on a per repo basis, like how you set up CI, it works on this project has this CI, this project has this CI. But what about if we started taking it like an abstraction level up? And what about if we started thinking, can we sort of orchestrate cultural rules that apply across all repos in an organization or a user? And so that is the core conceptual idea of what Peril is. We started thinking of rules like, any markdown file in any repo gets a spell check applied to it. Or any repo with a changelog entry, with a changelog file, it would get a check automatically to see if there is a file like app or source or projects, packages, and sort of say, hey, you've made changes in the probably app source code, and there is a changelog entry file. You should probably be writing those. You should probably be writing a changelog entry for your changes. And that's what Peril is. It's sort of cultural automation at an organizational layer. And, I used serverless functions with JavaScript so that you could write these very quick, very fast rules that would be applied across your entire organization. And, we got to this point where suddenly we were starting to abuse this idea of what a cultural rule is. And you would see things like, if a comment comes in that says merge on green, then Peril would wait until all of the sort of status is on a pull request, those little green dots are green. And when they are green, then it would merge it. And suddenly you've gone from like a system that is really good for providing cultural like norms across many pull requests to a very cheap and easy automation tool. And this is where you can start to see the sense of like how it merges with like responsibilities with GitHub Actions. So to give you a sense of what Peril looks like, you would create a new GitHub repo. So this new GitHub repo would have a settings.json generally, and the settings.json looks a little bit like this, or this. And you can see here that this JSON file is basically keys which are GitHub pull request values and maybe a dot or a little bit of evaluation in the context of like some of the work inside the webhook JSON attached to a JavaScript or a TypeScript file. In this case, they're all TypeScript. And what this meant, for example, for the issues.opened is an issue would be opened on any organizational repo, and it would evaluate this JavaScript. So you would get a default function where the webhook JSON would be put inside, and in this case we use a danger function to grab the file contents of the issue template, and it would compare the issue template with the actual content of the issue to validate if they're actually any different. It's kind of disappointing that the amount of times people just create a new issue, change the title, and then never change the body. And like it's like a tweet complaint on the internet. It's like it basically goes into the ether, and it's not very useful to anyone. So I automatically close these. Like if someone isn't going to take the time to even write an issue body, then chances are they're not going to take the time to reply to what do you even mean by this issue. So you can see sort of like this kind of, here's this central place for describing what happens when a webhook is triggered, to here's some JavaScript. And all of this happens in its own repo. And that's an important distinction here, because by doing it all in its own repo, we can have a better security model than GitHub Actions can, in a way. GitHub Actions is applied on the same repo as your as the code, as where the pull request is being applied. And what that means is that they have to be very careful about what code is ran in the GitHub action, because a pull request could change the code that should be running in the GitHub action. And when you have things like security tokens in your GitHub action, then suddenly you you can't access some of those tokens in a pull request from a fork, and that's kind of tricky when you've got a large open source project where the vast majority of your pull requests come from forks. And so Peril's separation of a repo where all that stuff happens means that people won't be making changes to those files specifically when they're making PRs to other repos in the org, which gives them a bit of a better security model. And GitHub have fixed some of this stuff now. So we used Peril at Artsy for a while, and people started self-hosting their own in the open source world. And I got a few requests for generating a centralized Peril as a service system, which anybody could sign up for. And so I started exploring hosting Peril myself. And it was kind of a cool idea because a Peril would just be a matter of here's a repo for you to set up for your organization. Everything's just a few JavaScript files with a default import, so it makes it very easy for you to write and build complicated JavaScript that can in the end be composed and tested really easily. And I even had early stage venture capital folks who you've probably heard of reach out to say hey, if you want to take Peril, then I would love to start funding that at early stage. And so I got really quite close to building Peril as a full service when I got an email from someone working at GitHub who wanted to reach out about a big project they've been working on and wanted me to test the alpha. And, shock and horror, this turned out to be GitHub Actions. And, it's not fair to describe, GitHub Actions as being a copy of Peril. GitHub Actions is a really natural evolution of where CI was headed. There was a lot of companies were building this continuous integration system where it relied on pull request metadata, but GitHub kind of took a step back because they came in much later than everybody else and said, well, what if any webhook can trigger continuous integration actions, and what happens when you can start automating and orchestrating these kind of things at scale? And so it just happened to very perfectly be a fit for exactly what I had been doing on my own for the past few years. And so during the GitHub Actions Alpha, I took a lot of the core conceptual ideas inside Peril and actually ported them back into Danger in JavaScript, which meant that there was a very obvious migration path, but also that I could test out a lot of it also meant that I could reuse a lot of my Peril infrastructure in GitHub Actions while I was trying to figure out whether this was going to be something that a lot of people would use, which, it is. And so it is. And so I ended up just sort of calling it. I was at a point where I was debating leaving the last company, and I had this sort of three major ideas on what I should do. There was get a new job, start a new company with some friends, or take Peril seriously and start trying to turn it into a lifestyle business. That was the idea of lifestyle software businesses, which is just quite simply build a software as a service, don't try and take over the world, and just make it good enough, happy enough that everybody uses it, it pays your bills, and you can build cool stuff around it as well. And so in exploring that, you've heard the intro, I work on the TypeScript team, so I ended up deciding not to do that in favor of taking a job at TypeScript, which is a pretty cool project to be working on. And so today there's still a few teams using Peril. It's a solid tool, and it's not generally going anywhere. I still support it. I accepted a pull request yesterday, and it's still got a really reasonable migration path from Peril to GitHub Actions. And so, this is the second time I've been Sherlocked. First time it was with a package manager. The second time it was with sort of automation and orchestration in GitHub repos. And pretty soon, GitHub Actions will probably start doing GitHub Actions across your entire organization. And so, I don't really know how to feel about that. There's like a sense of tension that almost anything you do will naturally have competitors, but like when you have competitors that come from the platform owners, then you really stand much less of a chance at trying to reasonably compete. There is the idea that you can be, as you're smaller, you can be nimbler and, be more responsive to what people want. And, that was definitely a possibility in the case of Peril. But there's also like the downside, like, why build something when more or less the exact same thing already exists and it is going to be able to be used by much more people very easily. Like, it just didn't seem worth it for me. And so, have you ever had your work deprecated by a platform owner? If so, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I'd love some comments to find out whether this has happened to you too. And in the meantime, you have a good time. Enjoy. Ciao.